Hello, I'm Arvand Modarresi, Managing Partner at Artefact, responsible for the CPG brands practice. Today we're going to talk to you about the impact of data ALIA in the CPG sector, and I'm pleased to be here with Alexis.
Thank you, Yaron. I'm Alexis, also a partner at the Paris office, also in the brands practice, and in charge of the data and AI marketing practice for France. So Arvand, you're a frontline observer of the current challenges among CPGs. What trends do you see across all the clients we interact with?
We're seeing four major trends. The first is the aftermath of the post-COVID period, meaning the boom years of rising prices and volumes are over. Today there's real scrutiny on margins and a particular focus on profitability. So everything related to data and AI must demonstrate a clear ROI. The second trend concerns everything related to managing companies in a highly volatile world. Today we have continents following very different trajectories. China is taking time to recover, the United States is experiencing great volatility, and Europe is somewhat in between the two. What companies are looking for today is to truly understand in real time what is happening in the market, to have their finger on the pulse of the consumer, and to have a clear understanding of their sales, especially in terms of sellout. The third major trend is a significant risk of intermediation. This has already been going on for years, with retailers stepping in and, let's say, everything digital coming in to insert itself between the consumer and the brands. And today, with LLMs and AI agents, there is now a risk for brands of losing that control. And the fourth, again related to AI and agents, is a complete revolution in business processes for CPG companies, whether in marketing, sales, or operations. Here, there are outdated processes that need to be redesigned to serve customers faster, more agilely, and in a more personalized way. So, on this first point, which concerns the need to demonstrate performance and ROI, what are the main levers that CPG companies are working on today?
What is certain is that we didn't wait until 2025 to talk about ROI, of course, but the pressure is extremely high, as you rightly said, following the end of the COVID period. The big difference now is that today, a number of major groups are very well equipped to monitor and optimize their ROI. That is to say, all the tools you know well, marketing mix modeling, MRI, all the incrementality tests, if we're talking about the marketing world, have become widely adopted. The entry cost to develop this kind of project, to roll it out across the company, and also to encourage its adoption, all of that is now more accessible, and there is greater maturity within our organizations. So, when the word ROI is mentioned, usually by CFOs, whether it's the marketing teams, the sales teams, or other functions, today we have the ability to respond, to provide a much more robust analytical answer. So all these topics, once again, are not necessarily new from a mathematical model perspective, since these models have been around for 5 to 10 years. Today, however, they are widely used, and now we have the ability to manage ROI and respond, whether at the board level or to shareholders, with great precision and a lot of responsiveness. I mentioned marketing, we're talking about sales, but in the end, all areas are affected.
And when you talk about marketing, and indeed when you spoke even more specifically about sales, we hear a lot about RGM these days. It seems to me that for years now, quite a few RGM management tools have been implemented. Now, what we're seeing, especially post-COVID, is that before we could implement fairly straightforward price increases and consumers would absorb them. Now we're moving towards increasingly precise and sophisticated algorithms to optimize pricing based on channels, players, products, and categories. And in this area, we're starting to see a broader increase in maturity.
Yes, and we've moved from RGM done in Excel spreadsheets, as we've seen over the past 10 years, to RGM that is directly integrated into dashboards and econometric models, which ultimately allows us to manage different levels of trade terms and various commercial counterparts. This also paves the way for more sophisticated modes of collaboration with retailers, with richer joint business plans where all the counterparts are better calculated and better integrated into the business plans. So all of this generally contributes to a higher level of mastery in RGM.
That's super interesting because it really bridges to the second trend, which is managing volatility, where today brands are highly dependent on major panelists, on Nielsen data, and so on understanding their market share and the evolution of consumer trends. And they are increasingly working with retailers precisely to obtain even more refined and real-time data so they can analyze performance at the product level by category and by channel. These discussions are now being integrated into joint business plans with retailers in order to drive use cases that not only provide direct insight into performance, but also allow them to build automation use cases together, whether for promotions, assortment, pricing, and so on. The second significant area where collaborative efforts can truly come into play is more on the consumer-facing side, where retailers' advanced analytical offerings are continually expanding in terms of valuable shopper insights, comprehensive behavioral patterns, and so forth. Here, brands are no longer just solely relying on traditional panelists or established market research companies like Kantar to deeply understand intricate consumer purchasing behavior, but are now actively tapping into rich, granular data that can be readily found in secure clean rooms, dynamic live ramps, and various other innovative platforms to meticulously analyze crucial migration phenomena, customer lifetime value, CLTV, and a multitude of other essential metrics, especially for those brands that historically had absolutely no direct access to this particular type of invaluable data at all. So the maturity of CDPs in this area is also evolving rapidly in collaboration with retailers.
Which also brings us back to the third trend you mentioned at the beginning, which was about intermediation and disintermediation, an old debate. So on one hand, there's a lot of hope that we can collaborate better between brands and retailers, develop joint strategies, and enable brands to gain a better understanding of the consumer. And at the same time, we know very well, without being naive, that there is also an economic equation behind retailers who are looking to monetize this advantage. So what can brands do to continue equipping themselves and better prepare for this dialogue, let's put it that way, with retailers?
That's really interesting because historically, the retailer represented a risk of intermediation for brands. Today, there's an even bigger player that's coming into play, which will be the tools for conversational tools, everything related to conversational commerce, which also poses a risk of disintermediation for the retailer. And so today, brands and retailers have every significant interest in truly working together to gain an even deeper and more comprehensive understanding of their valuable consumers, to develop impactful activations and commercial, marketing, or even operational initiatives collaboratively together in order to effectively differentiate their unique offerings and create truly exceptional and memorable experiences for consumers, whether they are online or offline. And so, in fact, brands and retailers today have every reason to collaborate precisely so as not to end up being just suppliers, whether of products or channels, to players who are now starting to capture consumers' time, like ChatGPT, Perplexity, and so on. These players have only one goal: to enter and take over the entire consumer funnel, from even before awareness, just at the intent stage, all the way through to the conversation.
And you know, we've run a number of tests to analyze through LLMs the position of several of our clients' brands to see what their share of voice is in this new world of prompt-based search. And ultimately what we see is that it kind of shakes things up a bit, meaning that since we see a lot of prompts and queries that are both highly personalized, highly contextualized, and also very high up, very early in the funnel. In fact, these are questions people ask themselves about complex issues. For example, I bought a second home and I know nothing about my insurance. Can you explain that to me? I'm by the seaside. What type of insurance would be best suited for my house by the sea? Or I have a tough choice between complicated products, etc. So these are high funnel conversations. And here we realize that the cards are completely reshuffled because this isn't the bottom of the funnel that the retailer is familiar with. It's a level that might actually be better for the brand. Maybe it's also an opportunity to rebalance the conversation?
Yes, absolutely. That brings us, I think, to the fourth trend. It's also about how ultimately AI and Gen AI, which today are clear risks and potential competitors for consumer attention and for this process, let's say, of recommending and directing consumers toward products. How can brands also benefit from this? Leverage it to precisely create differentiation in everything that will be, let's say, in the consumer interface. so creating unique experiences, as they say. We know that many cosmetic brands are actively creating intelligent agents to help consumers choose the perfect makeup directly through uploaded photos. These innovative solutions often lead to a direct conversion to e-commerce sales on dedicated websites that are meticulously managed directly by the different individual brands themselves. Or the second lever is to enable much greater agility and to serve the consumer in a more precise and faster way by transforming certain business processes, whether it's R&D or marketing, thanks to AI, to generate products much more quickly, to test them, and to drive marketing through automatically constructed campaigns. And also a transformation of the sales profession, where we are increasingly seeing the traditional processes of negotiations and listings, which used to take a lot of time, become more and more automated in order to actually speed up the entire process between brands and retailers. The last lever, which is also extremely important today, especially given the current economic situation for many of these companies, is everything related to efficiency. So today, there are many functions within brands that may not be essential. Quite a few support functions that are increasingly being automated through standardized processes using agents. For example, purchasing, all financial services, part of human resources, and even some marketing processes are really focused on efficiency levers, allowing this productivity to be reinvested in innovation and differentiation.
This efficiency is linked to a specific branch of AI, which is agent-based AI, something that's being talked about a lot right now. There is a lot of hope regarding the ability to augment employees, and you mentioned core functions and support functions. Ultimately, these are brands and CPGs where, in a way, the core engine lies in their ability to have a commercial and marketing impact. Ultimately, these commercial and marketing functions are now questioning how they operate, their added value, and how to generate qualitative outcomes by reinventing marketing processes. Whereas these are functions that, until now, had been relatively less exposed, at least in terms of business processes, compared to, say, supply chain or purchasing operations, which had already been more potentially automated. So these are new areas opening up to reinvent processes with AI.
Absolutely. And I can say that the fantasy in the sector is to imagine brands that are truly AI powered, where ultimately with just 10 or 15 employees, by automating and AI enabling, agentizing an entire part of the end-to-end process, we are truly able to compete effectively with many huge established brands that today employ a significant number of people, a great deal of expertise, but perhaps not always in a sufficiently efficient or agile enough way. So it's a threat on one hand, but on the other, it's also an opportunity for these brands to transform themselves and to completely rethink both their innovation and delivery models.
So that brings us to the last question, which is about destruction and creative destruction. Do you belong to those who think that AI will allow small brands to compete disproportionately with big brands? Or on the contrary, do you think that AI will further widen the gap between leading brands that have the resources, the NPI budgets, etc., and then emerging brands that are trying to find their way?
I feel like my answer changes and evolves over time. A few short years ago, I would have confidently said that the truly leading brands and the very biggest players automatically possess a truly huge lever and a significant competitive advantage because, in actual fact, the primary raw material they inherently have is data, and so they naturally have access to an extensive portfolio and a comprehensive history of valuable data that many other brands simply do not have at all. So that still remains a differentiating factor. On the other hand, they had a second lever, which was capital and, let's say, operational execution power, which used to be truly differentiating in the past. But today, my feeling is that with agency, a whole part of those processes can be thought through and reimagined and become much more efficient from a zero-based design approach. In other words, you start from a company that doesn't exist, you create a brand, and you build a brand from scratch. So I would say the ball is in the middle of the court. We'll have to see how large groups evolve, how they adopt these technologies and quickly transform their processes. At the same time, I'm convinced that very young brands will enter and break into the market at lightning speed. We've already seen this happen in the beauty industry, that's clear. Most recently, we saw Hailey Bieber's brand, which was acquired by e.l.f. after just 3 years in existence for over $1 billion. So there are clearly brands emerging. I wouldn't say hers was AI native, but it was definitely digital native and fully understood all the codes of social media. And I think that in the future, all companies that understand the codes of social commerce and conversational commerce will probably become unicorns in just 18 to 24 months. I have no doubt about that.
And the circle is complete since we know that a number of investment funds or even corporates use the power of data and AI to analyze the social performance of these emerging young brands and to obtain a number of proxies that will serve as predictors of their ability to perform on a larger scale, especially in the retail sector. So AI and data are ultimately used right from the identification of these targets, these brands with potential, to help create new major brands to be integrated into a group's portfolio, for example, to continue growing.
So, Mom, do you happen to have any specific use cases or significant flagship projects that you can share with us, please?
Yes, I have two projects that come to mind. The first one was done for Maison du Monde. This is public. You can see it on their website, which uses multimodal artificial intelligence, meaning it involves both image and text recognition. So on the Maison du Monde website, you can upload a picture of an interior you like, and the algorithm we built will identify all the elements in the image, then query the Maison du Monde database to find interior items that match the atmosphere and type of furniture you uploaded in your image. So it's another way to search and browse the Maison du Monde website, offering a richer search experience. That's the first very, very pioneering use case. A second use case, also related to LLMs, is the ability to bring your consumer data and insights to life. So instead of consuming your insights in the form of PowerPoint reports or dashboards, it's the possibility to interact with personas, what we call scientific personas, people who embody your consumers, whom you can question about their opinions or their socio-demographic characteristics and more. You can even test advertising message ideas or even visual content by submitting it to them, allowing you to pre-test before even reaching out to real consumers. So it's both a radical gain in time and insights, which will help accelerate the go-to-market process for products or new advertising campaigns, while reserving conventional research for only the very last stage or for particularly critical product launches.
And I imagine this represents massive savings for companies because today what they spend on consumer intelligence or market intelligence, specifically with panels, focus groups, and this type of analysis is enormous.
Exactly. So we did this in the United States for one of the leaders in small household appliances with 4 to 5 people. But the vision, of course, is to be able to model a large part of the American market with maybe 80 or 100 people who would represent a panel of the entire American consumer market. So before you, what are the two use cases that stood out to you?
I'm going to think more about the world of commerce in FMCG. The first is an AI assistant for negotiation. So here it's about imagining all the work, data preparation, negotiation support. We can picture everything that already exists. Of course, there are dashboards that show sales, market shares, and so on. So that's already consolidated, but the idea is to go further and gather more data, pulling from the history of negotiations with this retailer and helping the salesperson to qualify their relationship with the retailer. Is it actually about the fundamental balance of power dynamics between the fast-moving consumer goods player and the prominent retailer, and also, importantly, to effectively help them with their crucial negotiation arguments to push for significantly higher prices or a much better product assortment truly throughout the entire and often complex negotiation process? So that's a first use case that we're considering, a negotiation coach.
Negotiation?
Exactly.
Right next to you, but in the form of, it's the coach?
During the preparation phase and during the negotiation itself, so it's really the coach, exactly. That's the first one. The second one is, in quotes, less sexy, let's say less AI, but actually not to say more powerful, but extremely powerful. It's really all the work of reviewing and making sense of all the data collected from retailers. We mentioned it earlier. There's a whole issue around the data that FMCG companies purchase from retailers, whether it's stocking trade, sales fruits, facings, shelf availability, all that kind of data. And today, brands are paying tens, even hundreds of millions of euros per year to collect this data from store managers on top of what they pay to panelists. So the idea here is really to completely rethink how this data is purchased, how it is contracted, what the quality standards are, what the data transfer standards are, in order to automate this data as much as possible and maximize the value of what they're already paying retailers for. The goal is to ensure that it's high quality data that can be activated, even if it means renegotiating the current trade terms that include this data, either to make savings or at least to reinvest that money into real activation levers, whether that's promotional activities or in-store events. So that's extremely powerful because everything being done here actually feeds USKS type assistants or negotiation coaches, since they rely on this data.
And
secondly, they will also enable the delivery of more personalized experiences on the marketing or retail side.
this provides a direct economic impact for brands offering measurable benefits.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alexis.
Thank you, Arvand.
It was a pleasure. I hope this conversation was full of valuable insights, and we'll see you soon.